So welcome to ORD Survey Webinar number 6, Mapping and Point Cloud Workflows. We're going to continue with that this week. For those who don't know me, I'm John Rawlings. I work down here in Geometronics and primarily the remote sensing group. So we've had a lot of topics, and our list of topics to discuss has grown and will likely to continue to grow for a while. The last 2 webinars were presented by Kevin. 2 weeks ago, he went over the confidence point workflow. And then last week, he reviewed some of the geometry basics in ORD. Today, we're going to talk about where to find these recordings and some workflow documents that we're creating. And then we're going to go back to the 3D world and talk about the differences in the ORDs and the InRoads and ORD workflows when you're creating your base maps and terrains or DTMs. So I also want to remind you of the differences in your survey fieldbook data and your terrain data. And you should have touched on this in the initial training, but now that many of you have actually started using ORD, I just wanted to bring it up again. And then we're going to finish with the workflow that we have recently developed to where we can take an InRoads DTM and convert it to an ORD terrain. So this is the new ORD survey workflows page on the East website. And Lenny has kindly created a page for us and is uploading our videos that we are putting up on our YouTube channel. And she's also putting up any documents for everyone to have easy access to. So let me go to my browser and demo how to get to this page. So I just opened up Chrome, my browser, Edge, whatever you use. And I'm on the homepage, the ODOT homepage. And on the left-hand side, I can get to the East website by going to the topics A to F, Engineering Applications Support Team. And once I get into their page, on the left-hand side, there is a connect grouping of topics. And one of those options is the connect ORD survey workflows. And I can click on that. And it will open me up to another page. And at the top of this page is the ODOT Engineering Automation video playlist. So if you are not aware, Engineering Automation has a YouTube playlist, and there's a lot of videos on there from, I think they go back to 2017, and then we've started adding new ones on there recently with the ORD stuff. So you can click on that, it'll open in a new link. These are all the videos that we have on the Engineering Automation playlist in YouTube. Go back to the ORD survey workflows page, and we've got our survey webinar 1 uploaded there. We've got a survey webinar 2 and 3, and we will soon have the 4th one uploaded on this page pretty soon. And there's also a PDF of our ODOT confidence report workflow. So you can just click on that PDF and it opens it in the same tab. So this is the workflow for your confidence point routine. And if I click on the video column, let's go to survey webinar 3, the one from 3 weeks ago, I guess. So one of the benefits of having it in YouTube is that you can have chapters on there. So we have went through and put our timestamps in the description, and it gives us these chapters that you can just go select particular things you want to hear about. So if you want to hear about maybe adding my end link codes in Infinity, you just go click on that and it'll take you right there and you can play it from there. So pretty handy. Yeah, so go give that a look. Check out these videos. This one's been viewed 4 times, and I think I'm the 4 that have viewed it. So go back and use those, definitely. Oh, there's also a Bentley link up here to some of their training videos as well, if you want to go to that. So back to the field book versus terrain data and how it all ties together. To get there, I want to show the differences between the InRoads and ORD workflows for creating our base maps and terrains. So in InRoads, when we wanted to create a base map in DTM, we used the survey field book really just as a kind of pass-through file. We typically only used it for the initial basic grooming of a topo file, and then we created an intelligent DTM from the fieldbook graphics. So we would go view those tag graphics from our fieldbook and then create our DTM from those graphics. And then we repeated this process for all of our other topo files. We then took all those individual topo DTM files and merged them together to create an overall project base map in DTM. And then we would merge our features and different topo files in the DTM and then create our smart graphics from our DTM features for our base map. And in the process of doing this, we broke the link between our survey fieldbooks and our resultant DTM and base map. There was no connection between the two at all. So point numbers were lost on linear features in the DTM. And if an edit was made to a feature in the DTM, it was then different than the feature in the survey fieldbook file. And there was no way to quickly and easily tell where the data in our base maps and DTM came from without a separate, point number or tracking document to determine the topo file. So I have in my diagram here the link being broken right here. It's really kind of broken whenever we take those tag graphics from our fieldbook and create a DTM. It's broken there, but there's really two different processes. We've got our survey fieldbook process that we work through with our initial topo files, and then we've got our creating our base map and project DTM process, which is all just using a DTM. It's not using our field books at all. And there are slight variations. Some regions do it slightly different than some others, but this is kind of the general process. So that is the InRoads workflow. So with ORD, we're doing an about face or 180-degree turn. And really, it's for the better, in my opinion. We are still, of course, using the survey fieldbook for the initial grooming of our files. But now all of our other groomed topo files are combined into one single fieldbook. And we are editing and merging features across different topo files in that one fieldbook. So notes, descriptions, and attribute pairs are all added and edited in the combined survey fieldbook. And since all of the topo files are in one survey fieldbook, which is really just a database file, there's a record of where the features were imported from. And the intelligence is built into that survey fieldbook database. So because everything is residing in the one fieldbook, the base map graphics are automatically created from the features in that fieldbook, and the terrain is linked and calculated from the features in the fieldbook. And since that terrain is linked to the fieldbook, changes to the fieldbook features will change the terrain. So in ORD, the fieldbook, which is all the orange colors here, like we had in our InRoads workflow, this was kind of our fieldbook workflow. The fieldbook workflow is the entire workflow pretty much for ORD. There's no separation of the data to get our terrain. That brings us to our ORD fieldbook versus terrain data. So in ORD, the survey fieldbook is the container file for all of our data. It is not the terrain. In InRoads, the DTM became our container file for all of our topo data, and we created our base maps from our DTM data. In ORD, we create our base maps from our survey fieldbook data, and all of the edits to the topo data happen in the survey fieldbook. So the intelligence is built into the features in the survey fieldbook. And in InRoads, we created what they called IDTMs, where the intelligence was built into the DTM and not the survey fieldbook. So again, we're doing a 180-degree turn from InRoads with ORD. So the ORD terrain is really just a single feature in your ORD file. It is calculated from the survey fieldbook data. The terrain does not have individual features with different feature definitions like an InRoad DTM has, but it is composed of those boundaries, the triangles, and break lines and spots. Because the terrain is a calculated feature or its own entity, and the actual features are in the survey fieldbook, you should not make edits to the terrain directly. You should make edits to the features in the survey fieldbook, which will update the terrain. So let me do a quick demo of this. Yeah, so let me show this. So I've got an ORD file that I've created here. This is the data set that I've been using all along. I have a survey fieldbook in here already created, and I have imported all of my T files into this one survey fieldbook, and I've got my point cloud features in here. And this is just my fieldbook data. I don't have a terrain in here right now. I can go in here and just turn off, my fieldbook. All of my data disappears, but I've got all of my individual features in my fieldbook. This should be nothing new. I can right click on my all point features. It opens in the other window. I've got all my point features in here, all my linear features in here, nothing new to anybody. So I'm going to create a terrain from my fieldbook. Again, I'm going to right click on my fieldbook name, create terrain model, and it automatically creates that terrain. I don't have a feature definition on it, so I'm going to apply a feature definition just to make this stand out a little more. I'm going to choose existing contours and triangles. So when I created that terrain model, it is linked to my survey fieldbook. And as we discussed in webinar 3, I can break that link by deactivating my survey processing rules. So I can right click on this default model, do a deactivate survey processing rules. That allows me to actually edit things in that terrain. Maybe I want to delete edge triangles, which is the main reason that I can think of that you would want to use this, to deactivate the survey processing rules and break those links. But these two are linked. If I go to my InRoads Model tab and drill into my file name, go down to my terrain models and my feature definition, I've got my fieldbook 1 terrain model that's created here. And notice it says it is survey generated. So that is that link between my survey fieldbook and my terrain. It's saying it is generated from my survey fieldbook data. So when I was doing webinar 3, one of the things I kept doing was, I got this set on used, was I kept turning on and off. Yeah, it should be there. Let me go turn that filter on and off again. Maybe that's what you were trying to say, Lenny. I should turn it off and on. Look at that. No? Yeah, there it is. There it is. This is what I'm looking for. So whenever I created that terrain and applied the feature definition, it gave me this level terrain display general. So this is like a switch for turning on and off your terrain. So I can individually go turn off my triangles and contours like we've always been able to do. But I can also go turn off this terrain display general, and it turns everything off related to that terrain. Because that terrain is actually now just one feature. So let me show you that. So I'm going to turn that back on. And I'm going to go turn off my survey fieldbook data. And I can do that by just turning off unchecking the name of the fieldbook, and it'll turn off all the data related to that. So now all I have displayed is my terrain. And I can go turn off this terrain display general, and everything disappears. I can go try and turn on my triangles and contours. Nothing works. Now, if I turn this back on, I can then go turn off those individual features, and I still have my boundary in there, which I have 2 turned off. And then let me show you one other thing. So I'm going to go turn on my select my terrain by selecting the boundary, go to my properties. Under my terrain model, notice I've got calculated features and I have source features. And notice it's on the level E-Terrain Display General for my entire terrain model. That's why I can go click that level and change it off. I can change this level to anything I want. I could go put it on E Roadway Road Fence, and that would turn off my terrain. I don't want to do that, but I could. So let me turn off these triangles and contours using this menu. And notice my boundary is checked because that's one of my source features. If I go turn on my break lines, I'll go ahead and turn on my feature spots as well. Notice when I go to select this, it is all one entity. I cannot select individual break lines in there, and I cannot tell what these break lines are. So if a designer only has the terrain, they can't tell that this is a white stripe. Or maybe they can't tell if this is a roadway crown right here or an edge of pavement. So the only way they can tell that is from the survey fieldbook data. So if I go turn this back on, notice I can tell what it is there. Notice I'm seeing those break lines underneath all that with them turned on under these source features. Voids are the same thing. I've got some interior boundaries here in my survey fieldbook, and those voids are showing up under my source features for my terrain. So are there any questions on that and how the survey fieldbook is linked to the terrain and how you should not be modifying features in your terrain? You should modify features in your survey fieldbook and your terrain will update. So they are separate entities, but still linked as long as those survey processing rules are still active. If I deactivate those survey processing rules, I can go make modifications to the terrain, but as soon as I activate those survey processing rules again, those changes are going to go back to the way they were processed prior to making those changes. It revisits all of your survey elements. So let me jump into our InRoads DTM to ORD terrain workflow. So hopefully maybe that background info helps a little bit with this process of going from an InRoads DTM to an ORD terrain. And ideally, we would have been using the survey fieldbook in InRoads to manage our data. And if we had used the fieldbook as our container file in InRoads for our topo data, then we could have easily imported that combined and edited FWD into an ORD survey fieldbook. And there would be hopefully little to no issues with that, with getting our ORD terrain. But we have not typically done that. So we either have to go back and re-import the original Infinity CSV files or the individual topo FWD files into our survey fieldbook and make the edits again. So you're just duplicating your work. Or an easier method that we have created is to convert your combined groomed and finalized DTM features to a text file with the field codes assigned to each point based upon that surface feature style in your DTM, and then import that text file into the ORD survey fieldbook. And then we can create the terrain from the fieldbook, and it's really a pretty seamless process with minimal editing. So I came up with the idea, and Kevin put in a lot of hard work on editing a existing style sheet in V8i to get all this to work well. So thank him for all of the work that he did on this when you see it. And we've got several requests to do this already, and I have a feeling like we're going to get some more as more designers get into working with ORD and maybe resurrecting old projects that might have died and they want to bring them over to open roads, or lots of different scenarios when you may need to use this. So let me jump into a demo here. I'm going to exit out of ORD and we're going to go back to V8i. I have a little bit of trouble going back to V8i, I'm not going to lie. And I'm going to use the same data set that I have been working with on all these webinars. So it's I-84 in Forest Lane. This is the original ProjectWise base file that we used for delivery to for the project. So I am in my V8i file. I'm going to open up InRoads, and then I'm going to load my DTMs. Everything comes over on the other screen. So here I am in InRoads SS2. I've got actually three DTMs. I'm only going to load two for this demo. I've got my eBase 01, which is my original ground, and then I've got a bridge deck in here that I'm going to load. So I'm going to open the E01 and then open my eBase 03. So I've now got my two DTMs loaded, and I want to convert these to a file that I can bring into ORD, my ORD field book, and create a terrain. So I'm going to set the one that I want to convert as the active DTM or surface. And under my tools dropdown, under my XML reports, there is a surfaces option. I know I hadn't used this a whole lot in the past, but I did recall it having some functionality. And whenever we got this request, we worked through this process using this particular report to modify the style sheet and get what we needed. So in the surfaces report dialog, you have at the first box here, you get to choose your surface. I want to convert this eBase 01, my original ground. And then this bottom dialog, the features box, I've got all the features that make up that DTM. So the problem that we had was that in InRoads, we have feature styles that make up our DTM. And in ORD, we have feature definitions that we have to match up. So what we did was we took all these feature styles and wrote another file that matched those up with their associated field code. And then if it's roadway edge of asphalt, it's going to put that field code of EP on this particular point and put it in a text file. So you'll see that as we go through this. So I'm going to, you can right click in this, you can select all. You could individually select ones that you wanted. If maybe you didn't want to take the whole DTM, you can do a control and deselect them. You can also use your filters. This could be convenient if you wanted a large grouping of only certain features. Maybe you wanted all lines, all points, just your break lines that were not triangulated. Lots of different options here that you can play with. And you can make your own, of course. If you're not familiar with using these feature selection filters, they can be pretty powerful. For this demo, I'm going to just select them all. And then we've got an option to include feature points at the bottom. So if you do not check this include feature points, nothing will appear in your Bentley report browser, which is what's going to open when we hit apply. So each one of these features, 51001, is made up of probably 10 points, since the next one is 51011. But unfortunately, in our DTM, this is where we lost that data, where the data was broken between our FWD field book, our survey field book, and our DTM. We don't have all those individual point numbers on these features. So I'm going to select them all. I have my include feature points selected, and I'm going to hit apply. And of course, it's going to open in the other window. So here's our standard Bentley civil report browser, and it automatically opens up to the surfaces folder. We want to go up to the custom folder or custom dropdown. And in that custom dropdown, we have a style sheet built. It's called InRoads DTM to ORD export version 1-5. So we actually did 5 different versions of this and probably more, but it was a pretty good process to get it to work right. But if I click on that, it takes all of that, all those DTM features and their associated points and puts them into tabular form with a field code, start codes, and a description here of whether it is triangulated or not triangulated. as well as any other descriptions that you may have put on that surface feature. So here's a generic point, 2 generic points that we put a description in our surface feature as a 3 by 3 by 3 foot boulder. It carries over into this text file. And this do not triangulate and triangulate is important. You'll see whenever we get into InRoads, or sorry, when we get into OpenRoads, ORD for QC in our data. So those, let me show it in my feature properties here. So here's those same features. I can go to these boulders. Notice we have them in the description, and then we are transferring this box, exclude from triangulation, whether that is checked or not, into that description field for use in ORD. So you'll see that as we keep going with this. So I've now got this text file. Another thing to note about it is it's got, of course, the time and date that it was created, and it's got the surface name that you are converting. And it's also got the total number of features that you are exporting with a total number of point features and a total number of linear features. So that could be important whenever you're QCing your data to make sure you've got everything from your DTM into your ORD file. So with this data here, I'm going to go up to my file, and I'm going to my file drop down and do a save as, and I'm going to save it as a text file. I'm going to save it in my project folder. Just going to name it DTM export on the end. If I can type, hit save. And we've actually got another DTM. If I knew I was going to have to convert all these, I would probably do them all at once. So I can select this eWork 03, which is my existing bridge deck. Again, a lot smaller. I can just select it all, make sure my include feature points is checked, and do an apply. And it will bring up that browser. Again, I can go up to my custom folder dropdown, go to the right style sheet, this o.dtm to ORD export. It gets all my data in here. I can do a file save as. So we're going to save this as an eBase 03 DTM export. Go ahead and close out of here. So I've got my DTMs exported into tabular or text form. I'm going to go ahead and close out of MicroStation. And I'm going to create a new ORD file. I've already created a file just to save a little bit of time. So I'm just going to open the file that I have created. And I'm just going to do the, looks like I named it wrong, but eBase 01 file here. Okay, so I just have a blank file. I created it with the seed 3D seed file. And I'm going to go create a new field book. And you can see I've done this a couple times. So my field book name, I'm just naming it the key number, OG or original ground, DTM to ORD. I'll left click to accept that. And I've now got my field book. So I now want to import that text file that I created. Let me go open that up so you can see it. So I created this eBase 01 DTM export file. So this is the file. It's got 4,000, approximately 4,000 point features in it. So I'm going to import that text file into this field book. So I right click on my field book name, import file, and we have a text import wizard file already created, so you don't have to go through the text import wizard. You can just simply go through import file, select the wizard or TIW file that you want to use. And right here, we've got this TIW Oregon DOT TXT DTM to ORD import file. And that will set up everything you need to just pop that in, as long as you don't make any edits to it in the interim process from InRoads exporting to bringing it into ORD. So I'm just going to do this eBase 01. I'm going to say open. Takes a little bit to import that 4,000 features. One of the things that I did get with this particular file is a duplicate point feature found. So I had a couple signs that had duplicate point names. So I'm not sure how that happened from the DTM, but I can use this, like I said in the first 3 webinars, use this point renaming feature or tool cautiously. This is actually the process where we discovered that this was creating issues, whereas randomly dropping start codes. But I have not had issues with just doing point features or random features and adding the suffixes to them. So I'm going to go ahead and add a suffix to this so that it imports them both. And again, I can go to my differences tab and see that they have different coordinates. So this one has a northing of 106,238. This other one has a northing of 106,346. So they are different features, and I want to keep them both. So I'm going to go ahead and say apply to add that suffix. Again, it does it on another sign that I had that was a duplicate. And it just imported all that data pretty quickly from my InRoads DTM to my ORD survey field book. And all of my features, all of my linear features are dynamic link features. They all have that start code. They're all composed of the right points. I can go in, they all have these point locators on them, and they've got manipulators, so I can move them around. Not that I should be doing that, but you have the capability. So now I need to create my terrain model. Before that, I'm going to show you how all of those DTM feature styles now have field codes assigned to them. So we had an exterior boundary in our InRoads DTM. Notice that exterior boundary now has a field code of BX, and it's got all the points that make up that exterior boundary from the InRoads DTM. What it will not have are the original point numbers. So if it was surface feature, if the surface feature name was 1, it's going to be a 1 underbar 1, 1 underbar 2, so forth until you get to the end of that. So I think this one had like 300 and something on the end of number 1 on the boundary. No. Yeah, 314. And then my first feature here is 51,001. And of course, we've got this underbar on the end of it. So it's got 8 features, 8 points on this first EP. So one of the disadvantages of this is that you do lose those point numbers that we would have got if we had went individually and brought in those Infinity CSV files. But we figured since you were coming from a DTM2 here, you didn't have those in your DTM, so it's not that big of a loss. So I can now create a DTM, or sorry, a terrain from this fieldbook data. I can go to create terrain model, right click on my fieldbook name, create terrain model, and mine come in on default or no feature definition. I'm just going to assign a feature definition to this. And I've got my data, and it looks pretty much just like it looked in my InRoads DTM. However, there are some quirky things that you do have to check. Not necessarily quirky, but we did some things in InRoads because we did have that little exclude from triangulation button where we could have a surface feature style that was not supposed to be triangulated that we can make triangulated. So we need to go through and check all that and make sure that we've got the right field code on these features to either triangulate or not triangulate. So there's a pretty easy process to do that in the survey details. So I can go drop down my all linear features. I can do a right click and select my details and it'll pop that up. And I can just start at the top here and work my way down. Notice these are all shuffled and out of order. If I were to close this file and reopen it, they would be back in order. Why it does that, I don't know, but that's how it is. So on my ditch is typically triangulated. So I've got on the left side my name, I've got my description next, which is all set to triangulated, and that's coming from that checkbox in my surface feature description in the DTM, and then I've got my field code. So as long as I have this field code as ditch, and this is triangulated, and this is determined by feature definition, everything's going to be triangulated because I know that ditches are triangulated in our feature definitions. And I can keep working down this list. It goes really pretty fast. Here we've got sign face commercial, do not triangulate. Again, it's determined by feature definition. I know that that's not supposed to be triangulated. Here we've got an EP. Got quite a few of these. So I do have one in here that is set to do not triangulate. So that's a little odd. So I got to looking at it. And let me turn off my terrain so we can see this. So I got to looking at, I've got an EP that goes around here, and I went and selected it, and there are two, actually there's four because I got some points. There's actually two EPs setting on top of one another. So I got a roadway edge of asphalt 36, and then I got a 59. So my 36 is do not triangulate. My 59 is triangulate. So 95% of the time, or 99% of the time, our EPs are usually triangulated. So you could go in and check out all those points and make sure they're the same, but I just went through and deleted this do not triangulate, do not DNT EP. Again, these are dynamic link features, so you have to edit the points and not just the line. If you just delete the line, you're still going to have those points there. So I can easily right click on this and go to my edit point features. And this is all the points that make up that EP. One of the things you'll notice is this EP has a name of B. These points have BL, so they were probably a break line at one point that got converted to an EP. And I can easily select them all by left clicking in the top left of our survey details box, right clicking on the left column, and hit delete selected items. Go back to my EPs, all linear feature list, and now all of them are triangulated, which is what I want. Fences and fence break lines are another, these often get confused. So FEN is not triangulated. I noticed in my description they were all not triangulated here, so we're good there. And then my FNB, I've got some mixed up stuff going on here. So I can quickly go in and fix those. So my FNB, which is fence break line, so I want this to be triangulated. I got two that are not triangulated. They have the DNT in the description. I can just go in and change the field codes on those two fences to be FEN, and they will not be triangulated. I can do them both at the same time. Again, they're dynamic link features, so I want to edit all of the points, and then that line will automatically update. So I select them both using my control key, right click, edit point features, and I've got them both in here. So here's two different, you got FNB and then FNB 1001. And I'm going to go edit my field code by selecting the column for all of those. Say edit. And if you had stringing IDs on this data, you may not be able to do them all exactly at the same time like I'm doing here. This doesn't have stringing ID, so I'm able to do that. So go back to my FEN. Now I've got 2 more fences in here that are all do not triangulate and 2 less fence break lines that are triangulated. And I can keep working my way down through all of these. Generic break line and generic line often get confused. Guardrails and guardrail break lines often get confused as well. As you can see, we've got quite a few guardrail break lines that are set to do not triangulate. Again, I can do the same thing, select them all, right click, edit point features, and just go change that field code to the GR, which has a feature definition of do not include in your terrain model attribute. And I can keep going through that, doing the rest of it. I don't think I need to show any more of that. But then I would go and also check my point features. Now on your point features list, you're also going to have those linear features. So if you went through all the linear features and edited the point features of your linear features, then you don't necessarily have to check all those. You can, it's a pretty quick process, but not totally necessary. So again, I could just go through barrier and barrier non-triangulated often get confused as well. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I could go through these like a borehole. You know, you don't want those to be triangulated typically. Go through these and do the same thing, modifying either the field code or if it's, I think I had a curb in here, maybe. Let me go back to my linear features. I had a curb that for some reason was not triangulated. So we do have a field code actually for curb not triangulated, but if we didn't have a field code for that, I could go to the points for that, and I could change the terrain model attribute to do not include. So we're kind of doing the same thing that we were doing back in InRoads by kind of getting some of these mixed up and mashed together, which we shouldn't do. We should really change this field code right here. So that field code is actually CURN, which is actually a new field code. I don't think we had that before. And then I can set that terrain model attribute back to determine by feature definition. And because CURN in the feature definition, it tells it to not triangulate to that. So. The other thing that we've got is now we have, I said we have our descriptions. If you have any other kind of description in there, it's going to carry over. Going to try and find one in here with a description that's carried over. Right there was one. So here we've got some inlets, it looks like, with some descriptions in it that carried over. And then we also have some VBA macros on some of these. So this is 2 CMPs that come in as well. Excuse me, that's an attribute pair that comes in. But you also get your VBA macros. So for your signs and different things, those pop in here, and you can just modify those as you feel the need to do. So they will not automatically, the macros will not take effect unless you go up to this Analyze tab under your survey workflow and hit redraw. So notice I have some signs, 4 signs right here. They're all facing north. When I hit redraw, because those signs have that VBA macro in them, takes a little bit of time. Those signs have rotated based upon that VBA macro. So let me show it over here, actually. Get that out of the way. Make this a little bigger. So, and it still messes up so you can't see it. But it's rotating it to the nearest EP, 0 degrees to the nearest EP, which is over here. Again, you can go back and change that to white stripe if you wanted to do that. Or if you have, you know, maybe up here, these didn't rotate because this one is looking for an EP. It doesn't have it. It's got a gutter. So I can go in and edit that to gutter. And it will take effect. So that's the editing features as needed. And then one thing to note is if you had an exterior boundary in your DTM, which we're going to have in almost all of them that I can think of, and it comes in as a dynamic link feature. So it has all those points in there. If I turn everything off except for that, let me show this here. Let me turn on my BX point features and my BX linear feature. So that feature comes in as a dynamic link feature. So if you are not going to edit your boundary at all, leave it as a dynamic link feature. If you do want to make edits to it, it's going to be extremely difficult to modify. Not extremely difficult. It's just going to be difficult to modify as a dynamic link feature. So this is where the 3 different types of linear features come in. So I can convert this boundary to a pointless feature. So it's now a pointless feature just by using the context sensitive menu and convert. And now I can convert it to a graphic linear feature. So it's now a graphic feature in my survey field book. But I still have all of those points that make up that boundary. One of the other issues that you had with InRoads is if you had terrain points along your boundary, it would delete those terrain points depending on how you put them in your DTM. So in this particular area, let me turn all my field book back on. I have 25 seconds left on my countdown, but we got a few more minutes here. In this particular area, I probably had a series of terrain points along here, and they got wiped out when I created this boundary using those terrain points. So I can pretty quickly go in here and convert all of those points from that boundary to terrain points again. So let me turn off my field book one more time. And turn on those BX points. And what's my drawing scale? Inch 100. I can just select them all like this. Just going to use a shape to select them all. And I knew it was all these along this line out here that were originally terrain points that got wiped out. So I have 32 items selected. They're all the points on my boundary exterior. In my properties dialog, I can just go change that field code to TER. It's going to crank through each one of them. I don't remember it taking this long before, but I think Teams may be slowing that down. I think it's done. So let me go turn this all back on. So now I have those terrain points back, and I still have that exterior boundary as a graphical feature, and I can very quickly, let me go turn my terrain back on. Here, I probably want the boundary to go up into here. I can just, since it's a graphical feature, I can use my microstation commands to go and edit out those triangles along the edge. Questions?
You had one in the chat.
I have one in the chat.
Will there be a new code sheet for the field?
There will be a new code sheet for the field, yes, but I think we're still going to try and keep it about the same size, so every single field code's not going to be on there. So does that answer your question? Let me see if I can pull that up here. Yes. Yeah, there will be a new code sheet, but again, we're not going to put everything on there because it would be too big to put in your field book. And we had to add codes to every single feature in ORD. So there's a lot of them.
Will there be an electronic version that's available for people who are doing processing in the office and needing to assign a code?
Yeah, there is there should be an electronic version available, and we will create one. There's also one in the back of your ORD survey manual in the appendix that's really useful. It's got whether it's triangulated or not in your feature definition, and it's got whether it has attributes already assigned to it in your feature definitions. So it's pretty useful. But this can certainly be made as an Excel file and distributed for availability. So the last thing you would want to do before you, of course, said this was final is run your confidence point report and compare it against your InRoads confidence point report and make sure everything matches up. So, but after that, you should be good to go. It's really a pretty seamless process. It's pretty excited to get this because the first few iterations we went through were pretty rough. I was dealing with spreadsheets and making everything match up, and Kevin figured out the style sheets. So, right. So this is an overview. So yeah, we created that InRoads DTM, converted it to a text file. We then imported that DTM text file to our survey field book and created a terrain. Then we edited our features and QC the data, and then finalize it for delivery, set your correct feature definition that you want, and make sure you check the confidence points against your both InRoads and ORD confidence point reports. And we will have a workflow document for this InRoads DTM to ORD terrain. I've almost got it finalized. And we've got another workflow document that is about ready to be released for terrain boundary editing. And I've also created a new video on that shows the process that we went through in the webinar. Plus, I've added some for adding additional data and how you handle that with the terrain boundary editing. And reach out and let us know. So,
thanks, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.